Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I cannot be with you in class, but I did promise you a review. So here it is. Usually, when we do a review in class, obviously we run over a few concepts and ideas, and I get a chance to ask you questions and kind of probe around, see how well you know the topic. Can't do that at a distance, and so this is the non-interactive version of our review. But I think most of these questions you know. So we're reviewing for quiz number 4, and we are reviewing the books of Kings. Let's see, please review with me as you read from your book. This would be very helpful to have your books with you as we read First and Second Kings topics that come up. You know, on page 279 is where the chapter begins on the books of Kings, and of course that is the summary page, and that's a good page always to look at. This a lot of the material that I asked you is kind of related and tied to this page anyway. So what do I need you to know? Uh, I need you to know the purpose statement. I need you to know what do the books of Kings really were written for? What are they demonstrating? What are they trying to tell us? What is the message that they're sending? And so it's right there on that page. If you just take a glance at it, you should be able to articulate it in your own words. And if you can articulate in your own words, that means you know it and you understand it. So nothing I'm going to ask you is going to confuse you on that topic. Also, the major themes, take a glance at that. That is something that I need you to know. There are several major themes. The assessment of King Solomon, the pre-classical, classical prophecy, dynastic succession, and charismatic leadership, and then the golden calf cult. These are the major themes of the books of Kings. And if you just kind of commit them to your mind, you should be able to recognize them, at least when you see them on the quiz. So besides what the review information that is on right here on the front page, there is a number of facts that I want you to know from the book that we have discussed in class, and now we get a chance to review. So on page 281, our review continues. And the writers of this book, of this textbook, mention that the books of Kings were originally translated as Basileia, kingdoms, in the Septuagint, which you remember is the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and the way it is normally written is LXX, that is the abbreviation for Septuagint, and that's the number 70 in Latin. I'm sorry, in Roman numerals, so that's what it is. But remember, there are just the division of the Book of Kings, First Kings, Second Kings, is kind of artificial because really the idea is that it's all one big long story. We broke it up into two books just for the matter of convenience. But originally, it probably wasn't like that. It was just one big long story, and that's how it was written. Now, the authors discuss that for a little bit, and they talk about where the books of Kings fall into in the Jewish canon, and you might be surprised to find out that they are right there with Joshua and Judges, which means that they're in the former prophets. And why would the book of Kings, why would First and Second Kings be in the books of former prophets? Well, very simple, because remember, what we're studying is not history; it's prophetic history. It's the view of history that is theological. It's very pointed toward what God is doing, not necessarily what has happened as far as just a historian looks at it. It's a theological history, so that's why the books were placed into the category of prophets in Jewish tradition. So, speaking about Jewish tradition and authorship, I hope that you remember who is the author of the books of Kings. We had that discussion in class. There's a Jewish tradition that tells us who the author is. I don't know what you think about it personally, but the author told you, traditions are just traditions, and we don't really have any confirmation of who the author of that book is. And so, do we even know who the author of the book is? And the answer is no, we don't know who the author of the book is. there are theories, and one of them is called the Deuteronomistic theory. Perhaps you remember that discussion from earlier on. We talked about the school of scribes who would be very much concerned with Deuteronomy and the issues that Deuteronomy raises. And so the hypothetical school of scribes basically would be writing this section of Israel's history as well, or at least editing it. That's what we have come up. And that's what the author talks about in on page 282. There's a discussion on authorship there. So besides speaking about the redactions and things like that, let's just go on to the timing of the books of Kings. On page 284, the author describes the timing in which the books were written. So there's a very particular century right there that's mentioned in the middle of the page that I want you to know. So I want you to see the time references. And so though the books of Kings were written perhaps a bit later, the events that they describe is essentially 6th century events. And so when they were actually written down, we don't know. But you have a description of history, anything from 970 BC up to 586, which would be the destruction of Jerusalem and Babylonian captivity. So that's the slice of history that's being discussed, but it must have been written down sometime around the 6th century. So keep that in mind as far as the dating of the books of Kings. And the author mentioned a few archaeological discoveries that are very helpful in studying the books of Kings and really collaborating a lot of the information that we read in these books. And so he mentions two particular archaeological finds on the bottom of page 286 that are very helpful. And I don't know if you know about those finds or not. We didn't really talk about that in class, but um, perhaps we will at some other time. I just need you to have a general understanding about the archaeology's relationship to the dating of the kings and to the historical reliability of that information. So let's see about the kings themselves. How long did King Saul reign is the question. We asked that in class, and we came up with some answers. And how long did David reign? How long did Solomon reign? Do you find anything interesting about that? So is that remarkable? So this is just remember our class discussion, which is started on page 287 and continued into 288. And so the breakdowns of the kings were there. I don't really need you to know all the kings in the north and south. You can relax now. You won't have to memorize all those names. That's okay. That's not what this class is about, memorizing facts. I need to have a general knowledge of many of these topics. And so when it comes to the kingdoms, and once the kingdoms become divided, you have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom is called Israel. The southern kingdom is called Judah. And the northern kingdom lasts for 209 years. And I asked you also in class last time how many evil kings did the northern kingdom have? How many kings did it have in general, and how many kings were evil? And so that's the information that I want you to glean from that, because as we compare one kingdom to another, this is an important point. And the same question goes for the southern kingdom. Southern kingdom lasted 345 years, but how many kings did that kingdom have, and how many of them were deemed to be good, and how many of them were deemed to be evil? So that's information right there in your textbook. Now, let's see. The purpose and the message of the book we've sort of discussed already. And so the author points out in this text that the way the history of the kings is described, it's in very chronological order. And and the way the author goes through the book, I mentioned this in class, that he goes between north and south all the time as the kings happen. So he tells the story. He doesn't just tell the story of southern kings and then moves on to the stories of the northern kings. He just, as they overlap, so is the history in the books of Kings. It's very fluid, and you have to watch yourself so you haven't forgotten which kingdom you're talking about, so that you would not get sidetracked. And so there's a lot of contrast between North and South in the books of Kings for a reason, because the authors, the writers of these books, really want you to be aware of that. So we talked about the structure and the dynamic. Now, as far as the prophets go, there is some prophetic stories in the book, and this is the early writings of the prophets that they didn't really write, because the stories are not written by them. The stories are written about them, and we don't really have their prophecies per se. We have more stories about them. So the ministry of Elijah and Elisha fall into this particular time of the monarchy. And we talked also about what that means. So what do these prophets represent? Why were they there? Why they were a part of, sort of say, the Northern Kingdom? What was God trying to say through all that? That is something that I want you to know, because the author talks about it right here in this book. So, and also, I want you to know a few facts about Solomon and his golden age. And so, what was really going on historically with Solomon? What was happening in his day? What kind of prosperity? What kind of wealth? What kind of hospitable conditions were occurring? And what wasn't happening during the time of Solomon? It has been happening through all the other kings and judges. And so, we did speak about Solomon quite a bit in class, and we mentioned his personal failure as a king. And so, even though he was a good king, he did have some weak spots, and he did fail, and he did lapse into idol worship and things like that. And so that's obviously a big failure of him as a king, as a man of God, as a sage, as a wise man. He asked God for wisdom, and then he could not follow his own advice. So you remember the kinds of things that have befallen him, and what choices did he make that led him in that direction. So we did talk about pre-classical and classical prophecy, which is on page 296. As we discussed this in class, I just wanted to bring this up for you right now. That the basic difference between classical and pre-classical prophets is that the pre-classical prophets, we don't have their writings. That's how simple it is. And the ones that are called classical is because we actually have their works. We have, oracles that they have written down, either by their own hand or through a scribe, but we have been handed down their exact words. What are the words of their prophecy? So if I asked you, what did Elijah prophesy? You're going to have a hard time coming up with some quotes from me. Why? Because most of what we know about Elijah is stories about his life and what he said and what he did and where he went. It's not about his actual message. It's not about his prophecies. But Jeremiah is an example of a classical prophet, and you can obviously read all his writing and everything that he has said in a very precise way. So it's still there today. So that's the main idea I want you to know about classical, pre-classical prophets. Then there's this whole business of succession. And so we talked about dynastic succession, and we talked about charismatic succession. Well, these are two very different things, but both of them did occur. And in one of the kingdoms, the charismatic succession did not occur. And there's a good reason for that. Hopefully you know. Um, if you want to review that, that's on the bottom of page 296 and on. So the author explains in this section why and how the succession actually happened. And then the last major theme and topic in the books of Kings, of course, is the golden calf cult. And so I need you to know where the golden calf temples were located. Where were they placed uh, by Jeroboam? And so I also want you to know where the golden calf came from. Where was this imagery borrowed from? Who did they get this from? And I also need you to know the answer to the question is, what was the intent of the golden calf? What was Jeroboam thinking when he brought them in? And so the idea is, what was his strategy? What was he trying to achieve by doing that? If you can answer these questions for me, then you should have a very good grasp on the golden calf cult that is described in the books of Kings. And that's pretty much the last topic that I wanted to discuss with you from this chapter. So we're done with this chapter, and as I return, we'll get into the next chapter, next material. So hopefully you can be ready for that. Please don't forget to read. Don't forget to read your biblical sections as well, the passages that are assigned to you, and don't forget to report on top of your quizzes what is the percentage of reading that you have done, because you're actually getting credit for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's the review for the whole quiz. The page numbers I've noted for you, and you had the books all along, so hopefully you studied. I don't think it's a very terribly scary quiz. You know exactly what to expect. I hope that you all do well. So I pray that everything goes well with you, and we'll see each other next time. As I get back, we can get back into our textbooks, and I'll grade your quizzes hopefully by the next time I return. But we'll see. So God blessings, and be well.